All right, so you see a picture of a packed train, right? And you think, okay, that's a lot of people, but have you ever like really tried to imagine what it's actually like being in that?
Yeah, I mean, you're just crammed in. You're like sardines in a can, basically, right? No personal space. You're basically touching strangers on every side.
Exactly. And it's not like a one-time thing for these folks. This is every day, twice a day for like over 7 million people using the Mumbai local trains.
The lifeline of the city, they call it.
Yeah, the type of dreams, but also like when you see the footage and hear the stories, it kind of feels like a daily fight for survival too.
It really does. And that's what we're going to dig into today, right? Like we've got these firsthand accounts, some analysis, and we're going to try to go beyond just like, oh, wow, crowded train, and really get into what's going on.
Yeah, like what's the human cost? What are the systems? And also what's amazing to me is like the ways people adapt to this just crazy situation.
Absolutely. So where do we even begin with this? I mean, just getting on one of these trains at rush hour.
Oh man, yeah, just picture it, the platforms are packed shoulder to shoulder, everyone's tense, and then the train finally arrives.
And it's just this massive surge of humanity, everyone trying to get on at once.
And it's dangerous. I mean, one person said it's the most dangerous train in India.
Yeah, that's a pretty stark way to put it, but when you hear about what happens, it's not hard to see why.
Like people talk about literally being swept along by the crowd just trying to get on.
Just to get to work or get home, they have no choice.
And we came across this one story. It was really disturbing about a woman who tried to board while the train was already moving.
Oh yeah, she got caught in the gap between the train and the platform and.
And it was just tragic. And you think about the people who saw that.
Right, the trauma, it's not just the physical danger, but the psychological impact too. One person said they were so shaken up they couldn't even leave their house for ages afterward.
And it's not like this is a rare thing. Over 51,000 deaths in the last 20 years on the Mumbai local. That's because of accidents, falls, electrocution.
It's a staggering number. And in 2023, he was averaging 7 deaths every day.
Every single day, just trying to get around. That's just awful.
And these are not just numbers. These are people with families and jobs and dreams, and their lives are cut short just trying to take a train.
Yeah, we read about this woman, Usha. She's 35 years old. She's been doing this commute for 10 years as a domestic worker.
10 years in this chaos. It's hard to fathom.
And she said she gets hurt pretty much every day, some kind of injury, shoulder, legs, arms.
They mentioned she had a fresh bruise when they interview her, just another day, another injury.
It's like this constant low-level trauma just becomes part of life.
And think about the mental toll, too. It's got to be intense, right? Just the constant fear of an accident.
And it's not even just that there's the lack of basic facilities. Like at Dadar station, one of the major hubs, the lifts and escalators are often broken.
Yeah, so people are lugging heavy bags up and down stairs. It's just adding to the stress and the physical strain.
And the hygiene situation is just terrible. I mean, descriptions of filthy toilets, the smell of urine everywhere, even the drinking water might be contaminated.
These are basic human needs that are just not being met.
It's crazy, and yet people still manage to get by. It's amazing how they adapt.
It's like they've turned surviving the Mumbai local into an art form.
Yeah, like they have all these little tricks, these pro tubes that get passed around.
Like what? Carrying your bag in front of you.
Right, not just for safety from theft, but almost like a shield.
A buffer, yeah. And women will tie their hair up really tight so it doesn't get caught in the crush.
And then there's this advice that sounds almost counterintuitive, which is push ahead.
Push ahead. How do you even push when it's that crowded?
But apparently there's like this understanding that even in that density, there's always a tiny bit of space if you assert yourself.
Wow. So even just standing on the platform has its own set of rules.
And then even boarding the train, there's a technique.
A technique for getting on a train.
Seriously, you're supposed to board from the side, not straight on, to keep your balance against the surge of people.
It's wild that something so simple takes years to master, as one person put it.
And then you finally get on the train, and it's still not over.
Oh no, the fight for a seat, that's a whole other battle.
Right. People are constantly jostling for position, and they came up with this thing called the fourth seat.
The fourth seat, what's that?
So a bench is meant for 3 people, right? But you squeeze a 4th person in at the very edge just to get a sliver of space.
Oh wow, just desperate for a little bit of comfort.
Exactly. And we heard about Usha's strategy for getting a seat. She'll actually travel in the opposite direction first.
What, so she goes backward just to get a seat going forward?
Yeah, she'll go a couple of stations in the wrong direction just to be at the starting point where there's a better chance of getting a seat.
That's dedication.
And she's like, even if I get a seat, it's not business class, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like the bare minimum of comfort is a victory here.
And the thing is, this has been going on for years. Why hasn't anyone fixed this?
Well, it seems like the root of the problem is that the Mumbai local is just chronically underfunded and neglected.
Even though it's like the backbone of the city?
Exactly. They call it the lifeline, and yet the infrastructure is crumbling and upgrades are just moving at a snail's pace.
They talked about the Mumbai Urban Transport Project, which was supposed to help with all this.
That was announced back in 2010. They wanted to finish it by 2015.
And now it's been delayed till at least 2027.
Over a decade of delays for a project that's supposed to make things better.
And meanwhile, you see all this money being poured into these big fancy projects like the Coastal Road.
Which is great for people with cars, but not so much for the millions who rely on the trains.
Yeah, it really makes you question where the priorities are.
And the numbers are just mind-boggling. The system was designed for about 2.5 million passengers.
And it's carrying over 7 million every day. That's almost triple its capacity.
The railway officials even have a term for it, super dense crush load.
Super dense crush load. Wow, that's a mouthful.
And get this, a train that's built for 1,700 people is regularly carrying 5,000 during rush hour.
5,000 people packed into a space meant for less than 2,000.
It's hard to even picture that level of crowding.
And yet, somehow, amidst all this chaos, there are these stories of amazing resilience and even empathy.
Oh yeah, you'd think people would just be at each other's throats, but it's actually the opposite.
We read about how women commuters often get help from men, giving up their seats, helping them board safely.
Like this shared struggle has created a sense of community, a feeling of we're all in this together.
It's really heartwarming to hear about those little acts of kindness in the midst of all this.
But as one analysis pointed out, the spirit of Mumbai can only go so far.
Yeah, they need real change. They need investment in the system.
Right. At some point, you got to go beyond just good vibes and actually fix the underlying problems.
And this is not just a Mumbai problem either. We see this in other Indian cities.
Yeah, Delhi's metro is super crowded. Bengaluru has terrible traffic jams. It's all connected to this lack of investment in public transport.
There's lots of talk about new projects, but they never seem to get built fast enough.
So the existing systems are overloaded, underfunded, and one report even said on the verge of collapse.
It's a scary thought, but it doesn't have to be like this.
Right, we can look at other countries that have figured this out.
Like Paris, they've invested heavily in cycling infrastructure.
And it's really reduced pollution and traffic congestion.
And London has this amazing bus system that moves over 6 million people every day.
Maybe India needs to think beyond just big, expensive rail projects.
Yeah, focus on things like buses and bike lanes that are more affordable and sustainable.
Make it easier and safer for people to get around without needing a car.
And the story of the Mumbai local, it's not just about trains.
It's about resilience, about the human spirit, about people's determination to keep going, even when things are incredibly tough.
They're fighting for their dreams, fighting for a better life, and they're doing it all while squeezed into these impossibly crowded trains.
It's really inspiring and also a bit heartbreaking when you think about it.
And it makes you wonder, what does the future hold for urban transportation, not just in Mumbai, but everywhere?
As cities grow, how do we make sure that getting around isn't a daily battle for survival?
What needs to change in terms of priorities and investment to create a system that's actually humane and efficient?
These are questions that everyone needs to be thinking about because this isn't just an Indian problem, it's a global one.
Absolutely. The choices we make today will determine what our cities look like tomorrow and whether everyone has a chance to thrive in them.
So let's keep that in mind as we move forward and work towards a future where everyone can get where they need to go safely and with dignity.
Yeah, that's a goal worth striving for.